Welcome back to Talking Point. Well, we had a constitutional law point of view. Let us get a political point of view of what is currently happening with the ruling party heading up to the elective conference next weekend. I'd like to bring in political analyst Kim Hilaal. Kim, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's lovely to be on your channel.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, Kim. So, the NEC happened this weekend, and one would have thought that, given, of course, the evidence that has been brought upon to Parliament by the Section 89 panel, the NEC may have acted a little bit stronger against President Cyril Ramaphosa. That was not the case. Is it fair to say that he has, to a certain extent, strengthened his position within the ruling party?
Well, I think that's a question, and perhaps we should say it was an NEC that didn't happen this week. But what we've seen increasingly is that the NEC has become an organ that lacks accountability, which is really the signature tune of the whole ANC at the moment. And I think they could have acted far more strongly. I mean, the president has the right to defend himself and to take the matter to court. However, the issue is that he has brought not only himself, but the party and the country into disrepute. And I wrote an article for tomorrow using the World Cup theme saying, no red card for Ramaphosa, despite a Pala own goal. So, but, we haven't had a culture of the ANC holding its leaders accountable. And we see at times when there's most opposition, they'll rally around. And I think in another article I wrote, I said, we expect the dance that Ramaphosa does is not of step aside, but of sidestepping the issue. And that's what I expect from the NEC and from his parliamentary ANC MPs is more like a belly dance of support. Very few people have had the guts to stand up against his issues.
Kim, I mean, on Monday, of course, there was a press conference by the Treasurer General, Paul Mashatile, who was, of course, contesting a deputy president role in the upcoming elective conference. We had, of course, the spokesperson, Pule Mabe, coming out and speaking. And one would have thought that, okay, here's an opportunity for them to say, well, you know what, there are these allegations. The report says that, of course, he may have violated the Constitution. But it seems as if they had that support for him. And that support in itself shows that, like you've mentioned, this is a party that is not really willing to bring their leaders to account.
I think that's true. And I think the terrible thing that we see in South Africa, I mean, today we're doing this interview under terrible conditions because exactly. I'm trying to connect and we're battling. And I mean, that's just part of the tip of the iceberg where South Africans are battling every single day. And yet what we see is the factionalism of the ANC filtering into the streets and causing chaos. So we're seeing an ANC that is far more involved with its own political interests and personal gratification, enrichment, than in what's happening in South Africa. So what we're seeing is an ANC that is increasingly out of touch with the ordinary people of South Africa, so ready to defend leaders at any cost. And we have to ask whether even legal precedents and ethical behavior and transgressions of really important ethical codes are being broken or diminished just to preserve one man. And we see these rumors or these murmurings of what if Ramaphosa goes, as if our democracy is dependent on him. Because what we're seeing now is not the greatest act of democracy from the ANC, but what looks like yet another cover-up in the party.
Kim, the image of the ANC has taken a knock for a number of years. And this started, of course, right before the arms deal saga had happened. And then, of course, during the tenure of President Jacob Zuma, and a lot of people at the time when President Cyril Ramaphosa had come and said, well, maybe here's a chance for the ANC's image to sort of get back to where it was pre-1994. But it just doesn't seem to be that way, because when you speak to the ordinary person on the street, there is a lack of confidence within the party. And as you mentioned before in your answer, they are out of touch with the people. And we're seeing the constant crisis that is happening. One of them, of course, being the electricity crisis, where we are right now, stage 6, load shedding. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? The image of the ANC has taken a knock.
Definitely. And I don't think that the party will recover. And, but it's a party that's also forged its image on myths that have never existed. So I have been, right from the beginning, I've said, even Ramaphosa himself, he has this persona of being, he's been supersized, to use his own McDonald's word, as a great leader, as the leader who's going to come and take all the woes away and sort out society. But what we've seen, actually with all the presidents, I don't think any of the presidents have been exemplary. They've all put the party before the people. And it's devastating. As an ex-ANC person, I'm really devastated to see what's happened to what I used to love and revere as a leading revolutionary and liberation party in this continent. And yet we have presidents who have failed to deliver basic services to the people, and who have failed to look after the interests of ordinary South Africans. And the measure of a good president is, what has he done for the ordinary person on the street? And the ANC has failed. And it's hard for me to say that. It's not an easy thing, because many of us have become disillusioned with a party that we once thought served black interests, but is increasingly becoming a party that is showing its white colors.
Kim, before we go to the break, and obviously after the break, we're going to touch on the upcoming elective conference, putting the party before the people, that's a dangerous notion, isn't it? Because you kind of have to worry about your own skin before that of the citizens who put you in power. That really is a dangerous notion, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. And but I think we're getting more and more away from that. So I mean, I don't see any light. I think we have a new dawn that's the darkest hour in our democracy. But it's up to the people now, because if the people are continuing to vote for a party that puts the party before them, then perhaps, as people say, you deserve the government that you get. But it's a sad state of affairs for what we used to be called a miracle nation. Now we are a collapsing nation.
Yeah, and the collapsing nation, of course, starts with the electricity crisis, the power crisis that we are having at this very moment. After the break, we continue the conversation with political analyst Kim Hilaal. We will be looking ahead to the elective conference and, of course, the big position, which is that of the president of the current ruling party. Do stay tuned to Talking Point. Welcome back to Talking Point. In this segment, we are chatting with political analyst Kim Hilaal on the looking ahead to the elective conference and the current state of the African National Congress. Kim, looking ahead to the elective conference next week, and we have two individuals who are running, of course, for the presidency. President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, has the Pala scandal hanging over his head, and we don't know what's going to happen from now up until, of course, the weekend of the 17th. We have Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who, of course, has the digital vibe scandal that's hanging over his head. And we ask ourselves this question, based on the current electoral state of affairs, which would still see the ANC hanging onto the power, even if it's slightly, are these really the leaders that can take our country forward, given that they've got these scandals each on their heads?
Yeah, it's actually a terrible situation. And I think that when we speak about load shedding, I think the real load shedding is the leadership in the ANC, because it's never been as dire as it is today. And in fact, I think both of those candidates are compromised. And what's interesting as well is that South Africa, which speaks about gender equity and an ANC that speaks so much. I mean, they've probably got encyclopedias of policies on gender. But if you look at the top candidates that are emerging, there are very few women. And there's no candidate for a woman president, which I think is a crying shame, especially that we have in Dr. Dlamini Zuma probably the most qualified politician, not only in South Africa, but on the continent. And this is not a declaration of support for her, but we've had very principled people. We've got a leader like Lindiwe Sisulu, who's served government for many years, and they're nowhere to be seen in the slates or the top candidate positions and nominations. So it tells us a lot about an organization that we are choosing between two people who are embroiled in a corruption. Although in the case of Zweli, there's no charge has been laid, and it may not be, he's not been convicted of anything. And in the end, it may just be a political vehicle used against him. We don't know. But the fact that both of those candidates are embroiled in something is a sorry state of affairs for a country. And even if you look at the kind of leadership that the ANC is grooming, there's very little coming up in the ranks. I do think that we're going to get a surprise in December. If it's not Cyril Mapusa, I think we might well see Paul Mashatile. I think he's the dark horse coming in. And being a slightly younger and more agile leader, he may well actually get the position of president, not deputy president.
Yeah, I know obviously the branches decide, who contests what. And, I want to talk about gender equity because it is a sad state of affairs that we do not have more female leaders challenging, and especially for the deputy president and the president role. And of course, you mentioned Dr. Dlamini Zuma being one of them. The other one, of course, being Lindiwe Sisulu. I mean, these are leaders who have been there. They've gone through the years within the ANC. How are we going to ever see, a top position within the ANC being contested by a woman and them eventually being, the out-and-out leader? I know Dr. Dlamini Zuma lost, by quite a small margin in the 2017 NASREC conference. So, is there hope for women within the ANC?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all, because, if you notice the television interviews done with Dr. Dlamini Zuma, she's a qualified doctor.
Yes.
She's represented the continent, on the AU, but she's still referred to as somebody's ex-wife. Lindiwe Sisulu, who is a qualified, who's got many qualifications, is also referred to by the shoes she wears, as opposed to the miles she has walked as a liberation fighter, not only in a post-apartheid situation, but who suffered dearly as a child, whose father was arrested and whose family was harassed by apartheid. These are women that are shown in one-dimensional terms when they are actually exceptional women in their own rights. And I think it's very sad. And even in the Youth League and the various structures of the ANC, barring KwaZulu-Natal, we're seeing very little representation of women. And I don't think the ANC is going to have a female candidate for many, many years to come.
Kim, one man who's kind of sat back and observed all that has happened in the last week is our current deputy president, David Mapusa. You spoke about a dark horse earlier on with Paul Mashatile. What are his chances, David Mapusa, with regards to the slate that he would bring within the ANC?
Well, he's the man of drama. If we remember NASREC 5 years ago, who would have thought that he would side exactly with the side that he wasn't going to side with? So in politics, anything is possible. And in South African politics, anything goes, actually. But I don't see him emerging. I think he's been an absent deputy president. I think his following has been eradicated or certainly reduced since the last election. And I think he's been another very great disappointment for the ANC. And, you know, but the rotating of these old ministers, I mean, I suppose I'm even referring to Dlamini Zuma or Lindiwe Sisulu, you know, it's showing not only the ANC's lack of ability to push strong women to the front, but young contestants. And I think that's very problematic, especially with the EFF emerging. I think they'll emerge stronger in the next election with a young, vibrant South African constituency more firmly behind them, because the ANC is not representing the youth of South Africa. It's not representing the women of South Africa. In fact, I don't quite know who it's representing at the moment.
Yeah, and I want to talk about youth, because obviously when we talk of the ANC Youth League and the last golden era of that ANC Youth League, when Julius Malema was, of course, the president, and you had Ronald Lamola as the deputy president, it just seems as if the ANC, in terms of its direction, is lacking towards the youth. That could hurt them, could that?
I think it will, actually. And I mean, we even see, I think, parties like the DA and Action SA, I think, if I'm saying that correctly, I think they are even gaining more traction amongst the youth, because they have young and dynamic leaders. We may not like their politics, but they are showing, certainly at a provincial and regional and local level, a showing of young active leaders. But the ANC leaders, and I think some leaders that are rooted in the communities, where what we see with the ANC is that they're completely removed from the communities. So they're more comfortable in boardrooms. You know, I mean, we see our president enjoying the chariots of King Charles. He seems to be more comfortable in that environment than he is in many of the townships of South Africa.
Kim, one final question. Come before Christmas, does President Cyril Ramaphosa win his second term as ANC president?
You know, I've said right from the beginning, many months ago, and I still say now, I think he will emerge. And yeah, so let's see what stage load shedding we're on next year. I think we will one day think of today as, you know, stage 6 as a blessing. And I think that's the depth to where we've fallen. The ANC has been a great disappointment.
Yeah, well, in less than 2 weeks' time, we will know who will be the next president of the ANC. Well, that's all we have for you here today, Kim. We'd like to say thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Kim Hilaal, a political analyst, just giving us a political perspective of what has happened in the last week. And of course, looking ahead to the elective conference. Earlier on, we had Professor Pierre de Vos giving us a constitutional law take on the Phala Phala report. And what will happen, of course, this is a report that has landed in the Constitutional Court, and whether the president is able to be successful on having it put aside remains to be seen. Well, that's all we have for you here on a Talking Point. From myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the crew, we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We will see you next week, inshallah.